Hey, curious minds, what if parts of the Atlantis and Mu legends were built on lies? Today, we uncover the fakes behind the myth.
It's a fascinating topic. This enduring pull of lost continents, Atlantis, Mu. It really taps into something deep, doesn't it? A curiosity about, forgotten pasts.
Whispers of advanced civilizations, maybe even a lost golden age.
Absolutely. And you can definitely get lost in all the material out there. I mean, it ranges from supposedly ancient texts to some, well, pretty wild modern theories.
Yeah, it's a real mix.
Exactly. So our mission kind of with this deep dive is to try and cut through some of that noise, get to the core of these stories.
Okay, so where did they actually come from?
Right. We want to trace the origins, look at the evidence, or maybe more importantly, the lack of evidence for them being real places.
And figure out why these ideas became so popular.
Precisely. Why they've resonated so strongly.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the big one,
Yeah.
Atlantis. When you picture it, it's this amazing underwater city, right? But the story actually starts with this one person.
That's right. The primary source, the only original source, really, is the ancient Greek philosopher Plato.
Plato, okay.
He mentioned it around 360 DCE in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias.
And this is key, isn't it? That it comes from Plato specifically.
It really is. Because the key takeaway here is that the foundation of the whole Atlantis story isn't actually a historical record. It's a political argument he was making.
Ah, okay. So that completely changes how you look at it.
Fundamentally, yes. If you're looking for historical reality, starting with an allegory is problematic.
So Plato wasn't writing a history lesson for us?
Not really, no. He was creating a political allegory. He used Atlantis as a kind of narrative tool.
A tool for what?
To explore his ideas about the perfect state that was his idealized Athens in the story, and also to warn about the dangers of, well, imperialism and greed. That was Atlantis.
So Atlantis in Plato's version wasn't this perfect place to begin with.
No, not at all. He painted it as powerful, technologically advanced, sure, but also greedy, wanting more, always expanding.
And that led to conflict.
Yes, they attacked Athens in his story. And despite being powerful, they were eventually defeated.
And then it sank.
Then, according to Plato, came the natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, and poof, Atlantis vanished beneath the waves. It's very much a morality tale.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, though. If this supposedly massive, powerful empire just disappeared, wouldn't someone else have written about it?
You'd absolutely think so.
Like other Greek writers,
Yep.
artists, anything on pottery?
That's a crucial point. Normally, myths, legends, they pop up in different places, they evolve, you get variations.
Right.
But with Atlantis, it's just Plato. No contemporary mentions, nothing earlier. He's the single source.
The only one.
The only one, which is highly unusual.
And he gave it a time frame, too, didn't he? Like thousands of years before his own time.
He did, which makes the silence even louder, really.
Yeah.
A civilization that powerful, that impactful, going down so dramatically.
You'd expect some echo somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just highly improbable it wouldn't be mentioned elsewhere if it were real history.
And there's also something about Plato's description of Athens in the same story, right? That it wasn't quite accurate historically.
That's correct. Good point. Scholars point out what they call anachronisms in his description of ancient Athens.
Anachronisms. Things out of time.
Yeah, like describing features of a specific wall, a temple, a fountain house, as existing all at the same time when, archaeologically, we know they didn't.
Ah, okay. So that suggests what?
It suggests he might have been creating a somewhat fictionalized setting for his story, for both Athens and Atlantis in the dialogue.
Which leans back towards the allegory idea.
It reinforces it, yes.
Yeah.
That it wasn't meant as a literal historical account.
It's fascinating, though, how the modern idea of Atlantis is so different. Often it's this, like, lost paradise, a golden age.
That's true. The interpretation has definitely shifted over the centuries. It got
It
romanticized.
became a symbol.
Yeah, a symbol of a lost utopia, maybe. Or sometimes it's used as that cautionary tale. Again, see how even the greatest societies can fall apart.
Okay, so for ages, it seems Atlantis was mostly just Plato's story. How did it suddenly become this, literal place people started believing in, especially around the 19th century?
Right, that's when things really shifted.
Yeah.
The late 19th century saw this surge of interest in a literal historical Atlantis.
Driven by specific people.
Yes. A few key figures really pushed this idea, this sort of Atlantaology movement, if you will.
Tell me more. Who were they?
Well, one really influential person was Madame Helena Blavatsky. She founded Theosophy.
Theosophy, okay.
And in her big book, The Secret Doctrine, from 1888, she made some, let's say, esoteric claims, including that Atlanteans were one of 7 root races of humanity.
Root races. What does that even mean? That sounds, well, it doesn't sound like archaeology.
No, it's definitely not. Theosophy blended mysticism, Eastern philosophies. Blavatsky's root races were part of this kind of spiritual hierarchy, different evolutionary stages of humankind. Atlanteans were supposedly one ancient, significant stage.
Okay. So moving away from Plato's allegory and into something else entirely.
Very much so. It's a spiritual framework, not based on any scientific evidence.
And was there someone else around that time pushing the literal Atlantis idea?
Yes, very prominently, Ignatius Donnelly. He published a book in 1882 called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World.
Sounds definitive.
He certainly presented it that way. Donnelly basically took Plato's story and said, this is fact. He argued Atlantis was real, peaceful, super advanced.
And the source of other cultures.
Yeah, he claimed it was the origin point for many ancient civilizations around the world,
Hmm.
like Egypt, the Mayans, etc.
Wow. Okay. So Blavatsky and Donnelly really fanned the flames.
They absolutely did. Their ideas, even though they weren't based on, actual digs or solid proof, they really captured the public imagination.
Changed the whole conversation.
Definitely shifted Atlantis from philosophy to, for many people, a lost place waiting to be found.
Now let's pivot a bit. Across the world, in the Pacific, there's another lost continent legend, right? Mu.
Yes, Mu. Kind of the Pacific counterpart to Atlantis in some ways.
A similar idea, different ocean.
Pretty much.
Hmm.
A supposed lost landmass in the Pacific. And this one is really tied to one main promoter, James Churchward.
Churchward, I think I've heard that name. He wrote books about Mu.
He did. The Lost Civilization of Mu in 1926, The Children of Mu. These were big deals in popularizing the idea.
But his reputation is questionable.
Extremely. One source we looked at actually called him the father of crank archaeology.
Ouch. Crank archaeology, that says a lot.
It does. It stems from the fact that his claims were, well, pretty out there and lacked any real evidence. He said that back in the 1870s, he was in India.
Okay.
And he discovered these ancient tablets. Nayakal tablets, he called them. Claimed he spent years learning to read them with help from Hindu priests.
And these tablets told the story of Mu, huh?
Supposedly, yes. They were his proof. Detailed this highly advanced civilization, older than all others, the motherland.
Let me guess. The tablets disappeared.
You guessed it. Conveniently vanished after he'd supposedly translated them. No one else ever saw them.
We're seeing a pattern here, aren't we? Blavatsky's secret knowledge, Joseph Smith and the golden plates, now Churchward's tablets. Always vanish evidence.
It's a recurring theme in these kinds of narratives, yes. A major red flag for anyone looking for verifiable proof.
But the people were skeptical of Churchward even then.
Oh, yes. Lots of criticism. People pointed out inconsistencies in his stories, even accused him of outright forging documents or making up finds.
Were there specific accusations?
There were. Some related to illustrations he used, claiming they were from certain sources when they might have been interpretations. There were debates about specific tablets or documents he mentioned, like one about Moses and Hatshepsut.
Did he defend himself?
His supporters, and some analysis like on the MyMu blog, try to counter specific forgery claims. For instance, they argue his illustrations were interpretations of ones in another article he owned, or that he put disclaimers on certain translations.
But the core problem remains.
The core problem is unchanged. The entire edifice of Mu rests on Churchward's unverified testimony and evidence that no one else can examine because it's gone. Even the defenses acknowledge the lack of external proof for the main claims.
It's amazing how these things stick around, though. You mentioned Mu even pops up in video games like Honkai Impact 3rd.
Yeah, it does, which shows how these ideas, even when debunked by science, kind of enter the cultural imagination. They become useful tropes for fiction, for world building.
That sense of mystery is appealing.
It absolutely is. The idea of a lost, advanced past.
Mm.
It's compelling.
But, digging into the origins is one thing. There's also a darker side to some of these lost continent theories, isn't there?
Yes.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, there often is.
Yeah.
These pseudoscientific ideas, they can get tangled up with some really problematic racist thinking.
How so?
Well, the implication sometimes lurking beneath the surface is that ancient non-white civilizations, think Egyptians, Mayans, Incas, couldn't possibly have achieved what they did on their own.
Ah, so they needed help. From Atlantis or Mu.
Exactly. That these amazing structures or complex societies must have come from some outside, often implicitly white, influenced like Atlanteans or Movians.
That's pretty insidious.
It really is, and it's a crucial insight, actually. Realizing that what seems like just a fun mystery about a lost world can actually prop up some dangerous and racist ideologies. Understanding where these myths really come from becomes even more vital then.
Has Atlantis specifically been used this way?
Oh, definitely. It's been co-opted by white supremacist groups, white nationalists. They try to link their supposed Aryan ancestry back to a pure-blooded Atlantean race.
Seriously?
Yes, it gives them a mythical, superior origin story. It's also interesting that the big surge in Atlantis interest in America, back in the late 19th century with Donnelly, it happened when the U.S. was trying to forge its own kind of deep historical narrative. Atlantis offered a convenient, grand, ancient past.
And even earlier, you mentioned the conquistadors.
Right. Some Spanish conquistadors apparently used the Atlantis myth too, as a way to explain, or perhaps diminish, the sophisticated indigenous cultures they were encountering in the Americas. Like, oh, this must be remnants of Atlantis.
And didn't the Nazis get interested too?
They did. The Nazi regime, particularly figures like Himmler, were fascinated by Atlantis. They hoped finding it would somehow prove their theories about Aryan racial superiority.
That's chilling.
It is. Now, it's important to say, obviously, not everyone interested in Atlantis is a neo-Nazi. Of course not.
Right.
But the myth itself, because of these interpretations, holds a certain attraction for those kinds of groups.
Okay, so given all this, the allegorical origins, the lack of ancient swimmisses, the questionable 19th century figures, the problematic associations, it leads to the big question. Why aren't archaeologists out there looking for Atlantis or Mu?
It's simple, really. Archaeologists don't consider Atlantis or Mu to be real historical places.
Because there's no proof.
Exactly. Archaeology is fundamentally about material evidence, physical remains, cities, tools, pottery, bones, tangible stuff left behind.
And for Atlantis and Mu?
There is zero archaeological evidence. None. No ruins, no artifacts, no inscriptions, nothing that points to these massive continents or civilizations existing where they were described.
Even with modern tech, you hear about amazing underwater finds sometimes.
We have incredible technology now, yes. Sonar mapping, LiDAR, satellite imagery. They've mapped huge areas of the ocean floor, and nothing resembling the large island Plato described in the Atlantic has ever been found, nor any sunken continent in the Pacific matching Mu.
So the absence of evidence is pretty definitive for the scientific community.
It is. That total lack of physical proof, combined with the strong arguments for Plato's story being allegory, and understanding the pseudoscientific context of how these ideas really took off later.
It all points one way.
It leads to the scientific consensus. Atlantis and Mu, as described in these popular legends, simply didn't exist. Archaeologists focus their limited time and resources on studying actual past societies through the evidence that does exist.
Not chasing myths without backing.
Precisely. They work on what we can learn from material remains, not trying to prove unsubstantiated claims.
So bringing it all together then, these really captivating legends, Atlantis and Mu, it seems they're much more likely to be products of, well, philosophy and maybe wishful thinking or pseudoscience later on, rather than actual history.
That sums it up well, I think. Their enduring appeal tells us a lot about ourselves, our fascination with mystery, with lost worlds, maybe with the idea that we weren't always the pinnacle.
But we need to be critical.
Absolutely. It's vital to look closely at the origins, the evidence, or the absence of it, and understand why these stories are told and retold.
And stay aware of how they can be misused, too. That potential for harmful ideologies to latch onto them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Critical thinking, sticking to evidence. That's key when we explore the past and try to separate what's real from what might just be a compelling story or even sometimes a deception.
Not all ancient secrets are real. Some were made to deceive. Until then, stay curious.